Unmuting. Hi, and warm welcome to our Cyprus Permanent Residence webinar. My name is Pamela Miller. I am part of the management team here at Eltoma Corporate Services and Eltoma Properties. Our focus today is the process of applying for and obtaining a Cyprus Permanent Residency permit. Where you have not already done so, we suggest you review our lifestyle webinar to assist your research on why Cyprus is the country you wish to select for permanent residency. You will see the link on screen now for its location. Our aim today is to cover the sphere of Cyprus Permanent Residency Scheme for third country nationals. We will refer to it as the Cyprus PR for TCN, identifying the key areas and the next steps to enable yourself to apply for a Cyprus PR. EU nationals is out of scope of this webinar. You will see the agenda on screen now. We will be focusing on three areas: the scheme and the actual benefits a Cyprus PR will provide to you and your family, and the full process, including documentation required to support your application. At the end of our time together today, you will have gained an in-depth understanding of the Cyprus PR scheme, including the benefits and the process, and received information to assist you in identifying the next steps for yourself and potentially your family in gaining a Cyprus PR. The Ministry of Interior has implemented the scheme to assist an immigration residency permit to TCN. There are two programs that we will focus on, as seen on screen, and we will review the criteria for both in depth shortly. To recap, TCN, third country nationals, all non-EU citizens. A person can apply to obtain an immigration residency permit on the basis of one of the categories in the Regulation 5 of the Aliens and Immigration Regulations. This permit will not be granted to anybody unless the Immigration Control Committee recommends to the Ministry of Interior that such person belongs to one of these categories. So, the categories themselves. Category A through to D is based on self-employed status, with each category providing detailed information linked to the business sphere of the self-employed person. Category E is based on employed status, persons who have been offered permanent employment in the Republic of Cyprus, which will not create undue local competition. And Category F, persons who possess and have at their disposal a secured annual income high enough to give them a decent living in Cyprus without having to engage in any business, trade, or profession. Linked to the schemes on screen, our focus will be Category F and Fast Track Scheme. All other categories are out of scope of this webinar. Should you require assistance or have an inquiry linked to the other categories available, please contact us and we will gladly help. Contact details will be provided at the end of our session today. Looking at both schemes, let's look at the essential key points. Where it is granted, the Cyprus PR, it is granted to the applicant and his spouse for the rest of their lives. We will review situations where it can be revoked in a moment. It can be granted to their minor children till the age of 18 years old, and in some exceptions till the age of 25 years old. And we will look at all the family aspects shortly. Holders of the permit are not entitled to work in Cyprus, trade, or conduct business. However, holders of the permit may own Cyprus company and receive dividends from its profits. They may be an existing shareholder within a Cyprus company, for example, and this is permitted to continue. So when could the PR be revoked? Number one, where the holder of the permit was granted permanent residency in another country other than the country of his nationality. Number two, where he or she did not visit Cyprus for a period longer than 2 years continuously, this being a set criteria of the PR scheme. where an existing property purchased under the fast track option has been sold and a new property of the required value has not been purchased. We will review fast track in more detail shortly. Okay, so looking at category F, where a TCN is okay with the potential time frame involved, and we would stress at this time 5 to 12 months period could be common with this option for the outcome of the application to be advised, as our experience has shown. Or alternatively, the TCN does not wish to meet the set criteria of the fast track programme. Category F, as we refer to it, is the option available. The first key point under category F is linked to the secured annual income. Does the TCN have sufficient annual income high enough to give him and her and family a decent living in Cyprus without having to engage in any business, trade or profession? This being the essential point here. The TCN's income must come from legal sources from abroad, for example, from pensions, savings, business activities, ownership of companies, etc. And we find most applicants within this category, the majority of them are being retired person. Per the provisions of the law, the minimum annual income required is €9,568.17 for a single applicant and €4,613.22 for every dependent person. However, the Civil Registry and Immigration Department may demand additional amounts as necessary. The actual amounts set are linked to the original amounts, which were in Cypriot pounds, hence the exact euro cents conversion. Let's just refer to it as €10,000 for the applicant and €5,000 for each dependent. The potential additional amounts might be requested for the following: annual maintenance expenses of the owned property, educational expenses, and the medical or other needs of the family per each particular case. It is always necessary to take into consideration all needs of the family of the applicant and to offer concrete evidence that the applicant is able to cover all those needs on a long-term basis. Also, it must be proven that the funds are coming from abroad and will be enough to cover all expenses of the family. Category F permit is granted once. However, it should be noted that the permanent stay in Cyprus, the immigration authorities will examine the stability and reliability of annual income during a longer timescale, including the applicant holding savings within a bank in Cyprus. In summary, the applicant has sufficient income to cover expenses for himself and his family. These funds come from abroad and from legal sources, and this income being secure, reliable, and consistent on a long-term basis. So to avoid duplication, thereafter the process involved for Category F, the application form, documentation, etc., is similar to that of the fast track scheme, and we will go into that shortly. So moving our focus now to the fast track procedure for granting Cyprus PR. First of all, requirements: property purchase. Upon the decision of the Ministry of Interior of the Republic of Cyprus, dated on the 7th of May 2009, where a non-EU member buys a residential property for himself and his family of €300,000 and more, his application for PR Category F will be examined positively. There are conditions linked to the property purchase. First of all, it must be purchased in Cyprus. The purchasers could be an applicant, or the applicant and his spouse, or indeed a Cyprus company. The seller of the property must be a developer who built this particular property. It must be a new property. Resale, secondary property do not qualify, and this is effective from the 7th of May 2013, where resales are not acceptable. The purchase price must be at least €300,000, excluding VAT, and at least €200,000 excluding the VAT, should be paid to the seller at the application stage. And proof of this €200,000 has to be given, proving that it's come from abroad. The contract of sale must be deposited at the land registry, and take note, it is possible to buy two properties, for example, a house and an apartment. And the conditions linked to those properties: the total purchase price needs to be more than €300,000 without the VAT element. Both of the properties must be new, resale is not accepted, and they must be purchased from the same developer. And these conditions that I've mentioned here are valid for a couple also, or a single applicant. Where the property is being purchased by a company, the conditions are as follows. The company must be registered in Cyprus. The applicant or his spouse or both must be shareholders, and his or their name should appear in the certificate of shareholders of the company. A trust deed linked to the company's shares will not be accepted. They must be the only shareholders of this company. If the shareholders of the Cyprus company is indeed another company, it should be proved that the only shareholder of that company is the applicant, his spouse, or both. Now moving on, looking at a bank deposit requirement. Per the second revised 22nd of February 2016 criteria for granting immigration permit within the scope of expedited procedure to applicants that are TCNs, the applicant must hold a Cypriot bank account with a bank deposit of €30,000 pledged for the term of 3 years. It must be proven that the €30,000 was transferred to Cyprus from abroad, and a bank letter of guarantee will be required. Focusing now on the income of the applicant and his spouse. As covered previously, income must be created abroad, not in Cyprus. The applicant should prove a minimum €30,000 of income for himself, plus €5,000 for each dependent family member. It should be derived from legal sources such as salary, rent, pensions, interest, and dividends, etc. The applicant has an obligation of not engaging in any professional activities in Cyprus. The holders of the PR permit must not work in Cyprus at all. Therefore, there is a requirement to complete an affidavit that they are not going to engage in any professional activity in Cyprus. Income from dividends in a Cyprus company of the applicant shall not be considered as a violation of the requirement of not engaging in any professional activity in Cyprus. Other points to cover here: yes, a health insurance policy is required for the applicant and his dependents, and the applicant, his spouse, and children from 16 years old should have and provide clean criminal records from the country of their origin. We will look at the list of documents shortly. Prior to moving to the next section, let's take a couple of moments to cover the benefits of having a Cyprus PR permit and residing in Cyprus. Permanent residency status means that you and your family have the right to live freely in Cyprus whenever you need it. It also provides the right to apply for EU citizenship after 7 years. Focusing now on the Cyprus lifestyle, Cyprus is located in the Mediterranean Sea with amazing endless summers. Daylight is around 14 hours in the summer and around 9 hours in the winter. In the winter, snow is possible in the Troodos Mountains in the central part of the island and is an active ski resort which is operational during this peak time. Cyprus is the most easterly located island in the Mediterranean Sea and the third largest island, the largest being Sicily, followed by Sardinia. The time zone of Cyprus is GMT +2, local currency is euro, and the political system is a presidential democratic republic. The head of state is the president, who is elected by the people of Cyprus and serves a term of 5 years. The population of Cyprus just over 1.18 million per stats issued in September last year. English language is common throughout the island, and for those of you who love history and culture, you will love Cyprus for sure. It is steeped in history. And as for culture, Cyprus has everything to offer, from excellent source museums to the classics, film, dance and theatre. What about safety? Cyprus has been declared one of the safest countries in the world, following Switzerland, Singapore and Japan. Also, Cyprus has been ranked as being the #1 safest place to live and visit among the countries with a population of under 5 million. As for education, the public schools in Cyprus are thought of well in general, and one point I would make reference to, the Greek language is used throughout, being the official language, whilst in most private schools it is English. On private schools, there are a number of good quality private international schools on the island, and throughout Cyprus, different nationalities are supported within the area of education. Polish, Chinese, Russian, Spanish private schools are available. In getting around, in Cyprus, driving is on the left-hand side of the road, with many driving regulations following similar to the UK, although regulated by the European standards. The minimum legal driving age is 18 years, and seat belts are compulsory. Cars can be inexpensive to buy and maintain, and public transport can be limited at times, as own cars being the preferred method of transportation. The great advantage to Cyprus being so small is that intercity trips often take no longer than 1 hour and 30 minutes. There is only 1 hour drive from Limassol to Nicosia, for example. And Cyprus is so easy to fly in and out of, with 2 international airports supporting numerous locations. Finishing on food and wine, Cyprus has an impressive variety of cuisine to satisfy all different tastes. In the main, Cyprus follows one of the most healthiest diets in the world, the Mediterranean diet. Cyprus is one of the world's oldest grape-growing and wine-making countries, ranked 50th in the world in terms of total production quantity, and winemaking can be traced back over 6,000 years. Being a Cyprus PR holder, you will have daily access to all of this. Okay, before we focus on the application forms and supporting documents required, let's look at the family section. The PR permit issued to the applicant covers his or her spouse and children under the age of 18. 2 separate PR permits may be granted to each spouse where they wish, provided that a separate application is submitted and the relevant fee is paid, without being required for the other spouse to satisfy the criteria of the purchase of a property, secured annual income, etc. In the event of death of the applicant PR holder, the spouse is granted a PR permit per the provisions of Regulation 6(2) of the Aliens and Immigration Regulations, with the submission of an application and the payment of a relevant fee, without being required for the spouse to satisfy the other criteria. Moving on now, looking at dependent adult children aged between 18 to 25. An application fast-track procedure, Regulation 6, may be submitted by an adult child. Unmarried children between the age of 18 to 25 who prove that they are students in an educational institution abroad with a minimum 6 months of remaining study period from the date of submission and are financially dependent on the applicant may submit a separate application to obtain a PR permit with the payment of the relevant fee. And the conditions: age between 18 and 25 is mentioned, be dependent on the parents, to provide proof of their studies, and the parents must prove an additional €5,000 of income for each dependent adult child. Now looking at the parents or parents-in-law, An immigration permit may also be granted to the parents or parents-in-law of the applicant of a PR permit with the submission of an application form, payment of the relevant fee, with the condition that the applicant presents an additional annual income of €8,000 for every single dependent parent. Applicants who are granted a PR permit without satisfying themselves the conditions of property purchase within Cyprus, the annual income of €30,000 and the deposit in a Cyprus bank, etc., are not allowed to include in their particular permit their spouses, children and parents. So in summary, the Fast Track provides a PR permit normally within 2 months, covers the whole family, and is valid for life. Now let's move on to the actual process, including the supporting documents. So the actual process itself, you complete an application form, you will complete the relevant checklist, gather all the necessary supporting documents in the required state, and pay the relevant fees. We will cover property purchase elements separately. So, complete the application form. On screen is an example of the application form. It is 8 pages long. This application form should be submitted to the head office of the Civil Registry and Immigration Department in Nicosia and is referred to as the CRMD Department. This can be submitted in person by the applicant or through an authorised representative. Applications via an authorised representative must be accompanied by an authorisation letter from the applicant providing details including the full address and contact telephone number of the said representative. The application shall be processed by the CRMD and be submitted to the Ministry of Interior through the Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Interior. An interview with the applicant shall take place only when deemed necessary by the said Permanent Secretary. Where the applicant is in Cyprus, he or she is required to provide his or her biometric features, fingerprints, photograph and signature. Fingerprints and signature are not taken from persons under the age of 6 years old. Where not in Cyprus during the submission of the application, it is noted that the biometric features must be received prior to the issue of the PR permit certificate and the electronic residence card. Take note, any false statement made in a submitted application or in the supporting documents is an offence punishable by imprisonment and/or fine. So we need to complete a checklist. And on screen an example of the checklist, and it's 1 page in length. Take note there are different checklists for the following: Category F or Fast Track process, dependent children between the age of 18 to 25, and parents-in-law of an applicant. Now we need to gather all the necessary supporting documents in the required state. First of all, the criminal record. The applicant and his or her spouse must submit a confirmation of a clean criminal record from their country of residence, and generally they should not be considered as a threat in any way to the public order or public security in Cyprus per set guidelines. Other documents that are required: confirmation that the applicant will not be seeking employment, an affidavit completed linked to full details of income, the amounts involved, countries and activity involved to be listed. For the Fast Track, original letter of guarantee from a bank in Cyprus confirming the deposit of €30,000 and its pledge for 3 years. Where the application is not submitted in person, a letter from the authorised representative is necessary as mentioned previously. A health insurance policy for the applicant and his dependents, the international passport, the CV, the birth certificate and certificate of that of the spouse and children involved, the marriage certificate where relevant, and for the Fast Track, the title of ownership or contract of sale of built property in Cyprus. This contract of sale must be duly stamped by the Stamps Commissioner and the Department of Lands and Surveys. The student letter from an institution from abroad that he or she is a registered student with the minimum 6 months study period remaining. All the necessary documentation that is attached to the PR application, including the translation into the Greek or English language, must be duly certified, per the Hague Convention 1961. Where the document is issued by an authority of another state who has not ratified the Hague Convention, they should bear diplomatic certification. Where an accompanying document required is a copy, it should be certified in the same way. On screen here is a summary of potential payments involved, which are required to be paid prior to or during the actual submission of the application. Before we focus on the fast-track property purchase element, we will take a few moments to review renting in Cyprus, perhaps being relevant for Category F applications. Renting costs will vary depending on the city and location of the property, with what facilities are being supplied, etc. So figures on screen are based on a 2-bedroom apartment unfurnished. It is standard practice for the rental agreement to be set for 1 or 2 year period. Deposits for the rental property is normally set at 1 month's rent amount, together with the first month's rental payment is collected at the beginning of the rental agreement. This deposit can be refunded at the end of the term of the rental where no damages have occurred. An inspection prior to said refund will be completed. Also, a couple of points to take note. Electricity is paid following the end of a 2-month period, water is paid following the end of a quarter, and telephone and internet can be paid monthly, and there is an annual community charge including rubbish collection. Different districts pay at different times, normally prior to the end of the year. Okay, so staying with costs for a couple of moments, let's discuss quickly the process and costs involved in purchasing a property within Cyprus per the fast track option requirements. Of course, first of all, you find the property, you pay potentially the reservation deposit, and it's normally within the range to 1 to 2% of the actual purchase price. You agree the payment schedule for the property purchase, and the seller and buyer enter into a contract for sale, which requires signing a legally binding contract. After the written contract has been agreed and signed, this contract can be deposited with the Land Registry Department. Regarding costs involved, first of all, there is stamp duty. We compare the range provided on screen with the percentages there. There is also property transfer fees, which are based on the property's market value at the date of purchase. Note, where the purchaser is required to pay VAT, the purchaser will be exempt from paying property transfer fees. Where no VAT involved, the purchaser will receive a reduction of 50% on their transfer fees. Where applicable, VAT will be 5%. And within the VAT calculation is the square metre size of the property. There are some new properties that are exempt from VAT linked to if the application for the town planning permit was submitted prior to the 1st of May 2004. Legal fees can range between 1 to 2% of the purchase price as a general rule. Immovable property tax has been abolished on the 1st of January 2017. There could be a capital gains tax payable on the sale of the property. However, this is out of scope of this webinar. Your legal advisor can assist with this area where this situation arises. There is no inheritance tax in Cyprus, being abolished on the 1st of January 2000. Okay, you have submitted your application and the examination process is in place. The Ministry of Interior shall notify the applicant and his or her authorised representative and CRMD as to the decision of the Ministry of Interior. Where positive outcome, the PR application should be approved within 2 months for the fast track options and approximately 5 to 12 months for the category F options. Within 1 year of the date of issuance of this Cyprus PR permit certificate, the holder is obliged to acquire residence. Also, the holder of such permit, as well as his or her dependent persons who are included in his and her permit, are obliged not to be absent from the Republic for more than 2 years. Otherwise, the PR permit is automatically cancelled per the provisions of Regulation 6(4). So, how can Eltoma assist you? You need to understand the process, the forms to be completed, where to go, what documentation you require to provide, and how to provide it in the original and certified true copies. It is best to gain expert advice and support throughout the full process, which, of course, here at Eltoma we can provide for you. At Eltoma, we have both the experience, knowledge and resources to support the completion of the application forms, the process per your individual requirements, and gathering of all required documentation in the required format. We have multi-skilled staff to assist at all stages of the process. You will be appointed your Cyprus Citizenship Officer who will accompany you through the full process, including where necessary visits to the Ministry officers. We can also act as your authorised person on your behalf. We suggest call or email us for further information. We are near the end of our webinar today. I will take a moment of your time to explain how we can assist you further. Here at Eltoma Corporate Services, we collaborate with island-wide developers and estate agents, bringing varied selection of properties, both for purchase and renting. And there's some examples on screen there. Also summarised on screen is some of the services which we can provide for you. Please take a moment to review. On screen now are all our contact details. I would like to thank you for your attention and your attendance today and look forward to working with you to obtain your Cyprus PR permit. Have a good day ahead.